Don't go. The words were barely louder than the rain tapping against the glass, but they landed like a hand gripping his wrist. He froze mid-step, one foot already turned toward the door, the weight of his worn jacket hanging heavy on his shoulders. Behind him, a woman who owned half the skyline of the city stood alone in a room bigger than his entire apartment, her voice trembling as she added, almost like a confession, "It's my birthday." If you've ever felt torn between responsibility and compassion, stay with this story until the very end. And if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep sharing moments that remind us we're all human, no matter how high or how low we stand. Daniel had only agreed to be there for 30 minutes. That was the deal he'd made with himself while tightening his son's shoelaces that evening, promising he'd be back before bedtime. He was a single dad, a man whose life ran on alarms, schedules, and the quiet fear of never quite being enough. When the catering company called, desperate for a last-minute replacement server at a billionaire's private birthday event, he'd hesitated. But the extra cash meant groceries, school supplies, maybe even a small toy he'd been saving for. So he kissed his son's forehead, whispered, "I'll be back soon," and stepped into a world that didn't belong to him. The mansion felt like another planet. Marble floors reflected crystal chandeliers, and every guest seemed polished, laughing softly, glasses raised, eyes sharp with ambition. Daniel blended into the background, carrying trays, keeping his head down. He'd learned that invisibility was a kind of survival. No one asked his name. No one cared where he came from. That was fine by him. He wasn't there to be seen. She noticed him anyway. Ava Laurent, the woman whose face had stared down from magazine covers and business channels, stood near the window, untouched champagne in her hand. It was her birthday, yet her smile looked rehearsed, brittle. As Daniel passed, she caught a glimpse of his expression, not envy, not awe, but something softer. Understanding. Maybe even sadness. It unsettled her more than the flattery she'd heard all night. Later, when the guests grew louder and the music swelled, Ava waved him over under the pretense of asking for water. Up close, Daniel saw what cameras never showed: the faint lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the loneliness hidden beneath flawless makeup. She thanked him quietly, then asked, "Do you ever feel out of place?" He should have walked away. He knew the rules. But something in her voice, stripped of power, stripped of performance, made him answer honestly. "Every day," he said. That was how it began. Small words exchanged between worlds that were never meant to touch. She asked about his life, surprised when he spoke openly about his son, about mornings rushing to school, about nights falling asleep on the couch from sheer exhaustion. No one had spoken to her like that in years. Not without wanting something. As the night thinned and guests drifted away, Ava realized something that terrified her. For the first time on her birthday, she didn't feel alone. And it was because of a man who would leave soon, a man whose life didn't orbit hers, who wasn't impressed by her wealth or her power. Daniel checked the time. Panic fluttered in his chest. He needed to go. He excused himself politely, turned toward the door, and then her voice broke. "Don't go." He turned, confused, uncomfortable. She wasn't the untouchable billionaire anymore. She was just a woman standing in a quiet room after the noise had faded. "It's my birthday," she whispered, as if admitting a weakness. "And I don't want to be alone. Tonight." Silence stretched between them, thick with things unsaid. Daniel thought of his son, asleep by now, the promise he'd made. He thought of the distance between them, the impossibility of whatever she was asking. Gently, firmly, he said, "I can't. I have a child waiting for me."